Hello and welcome to Emperor Watch Weekly Live. I'm Ileana Chan with my co-host Sara Vivacqua.
Hi,
Sarah.
Ileana. How are you doing? What a convoluted week. It's shocking to live in this world right now. Empire Watch is as important as ever as we see this crumbling, kicking, screaming.
Yes, we have a lot to get through today and not that much time. So let's see if we can break some records and get through 7 news items today. And we also have, I'm going to pull that up, but we also have Ben Chacko from Morningstar, the editor of Morningstar, the only English language socialist newspaper in the UK. So
Absolutely.
I'm pretty excited to have him on. Here you can see we're going to be covering Russia blocks WhatsApp. China's new microwave weapon is the Starlink's biggest nightmare. Hong Kong tycoon Jimmy Lai has been sentenced to 20 years. I know. And then we have some breaking news, which I didn't breaking news today, we have the PAL action ban ruled unlawful.
Which means Palestine action for some who doesn't know PAL means.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah. Sorry about that. Definitely Palestine action was prescribed as a terrorist group, but now that ban has been ruled unlawful. So we'll talk about that with Ben Chacko. And also we'll talk with him about the U.S. Oil blockade on Cuba and the ramifications for that. Then we're going to be talking about further the Epstein files fallout and also that Code Pink has been targeted by the US government, and we'll look at what that means. It's all sort of very, very much in that theme of crackdown basically against anything anti-imperialist. So me and you, we've got to be careful now, Sarah.
Yeah.
Are you scared?
You could be alone here.
I know, right?
So I'm the only target at the Empire Watch. Okay, she's the one.
Terrible. Yeah, like, we should be scared. Everyone, look at Sarah. All right.
You're looking at me, probably. They look at everyone. Yeah.
Okay, and I just want to say again, all right, so Ben Chacko is a journalist and the editor of the Morningstar, the UK's only English language daily socialist paper. Okay, so now should we start with Russia blocks WhatsApp?
Yeah. Tell us about it, Ileana. Russia does not sleep while working, isn't it?
Russia blocks WhatsApp. Let's look at it here. If I can, I'm bad at this. Okay, so this is the BBC report here, and it says Russia has ordered a block on WhatsApp as the Kremlin continues to tighten restrictions on messaging apps. Meta-owned WhatsApp said the move aimed to push more than 100 million of its app users in Russia to a state-owned surveillance app. This is very dramatic, obviously. There is a different perspective, however, from Russia, which we can see here from, essentially, I'm going to pull this up, but it's Channel News Asia. And basically here it just says that Russia, okay, sorry, let me share this tab instead. Here you go. So Russia, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters that the decision was due to WhatsApp app's reluctance to comply with the norms and letter of Russian law. And Max, which is their alternative indigenous state-owned app, is an accessible alternative, a developing messenger, a national messenger, and it is an alternative available on the market for citizens. So here we're going to look at why WhatsApp might be banned, and also we have to really give the context that China has completely blocked WhatsApp since 2017. And North Korea also has blocked like a lot of these different things because they have very strict internet controls. I think a lot of people in the West are going to kind of frame this as, lack of freedom of speech against the people, etc. But as we've tried to explain on Empire Watch many, many times, propaganda is one of the biggest tools of US imperialism. And so they actually use propaganda and they use these different social media apps, they use NGOs, they use think tanks, but social media apps to really infiltrate into local populations and gather steam for color revolutions. And Sara, you've had experience on the receiving end of that in Brazil. Can you talk a little bit about that in context so people understand?
Yeah, I think what we need to set the scene here, Ileana, is that shouldn't we be thinking why the whole world is deposit their conversations in Meta, in Facebook, in WhatsApp? What kind of monopoly that doesn't want to abide by national law are we following? There is a very sordid dimension in that one. I remember interviewing the great journalist Chris Hedges, former New York Times correspondent, and he was saying, we have in the US a so-called black box in the Utah. It's a computer now in suspension, and that's where the US takes all the data, personal data of its citizens, without their knowledge, without, of course, their consent, and put it there. It's a storage box of our life. So things that we don't even remember, they have it recorded. We're talking about spy giants. I hate the terminology, big techs. These are US Zionist imperial tools of mass surveillance. That's what Meta is for. That's what WhatsApp is for. I don't know if you know, but the European Parliament has now, European countries in the EU have now agreed to pass on EU data, your data, well, we're no longer in the EU, but whoever is the EU Parliament, pass this data for Trump to store it. We know we have the Five Eyes, actually the Six Eyes, and how they exchange personal data. It's not only, everything is national security if they want it to be national security. So what we have here is a espionage hub on us. This is not I'm not being dramatic about it. This is how it works. Ask the FBI, ask CIA, how they survey people. They begin by their open sources. They begin 70% apparently of the information they extract from open sources. But then they have access to all those companies storing our data.
Yeah, let's back up a little bit and show this article here about precisely what you're talking about. Here you can see here, WhatsApp, this is only 2 days ago too. WhatsApp wins right to challenge 225 million euro Irish privacy fine. So the ECJ, I don't know what the ECJ stands for. What is the ECJ? The European Court of Justice, sorry. The European Court of Justice overturns decision of lower court and legal victory for Meta-owned messaging app. So essentially, this is exactly what you're talking about. Meta here has won the right to challenge this fine imposed by the Irish data regulator. So
yeah, so they operate above the law, above national states. Is what we are talking, this transnational coup d'etat by corporations that want to be outside this national container. In Brazil, we had Elon Musk tweeting that Brazil is a dictatorship, asking, along with Glenn Greenwald, for military intervention because we have our own rules. Let's say Rumble, which is actually Russian, didn't want to abide by Brazilian rules. Elon Musk, less so. Elon Musk is a very complicated case. So Elon Musk, in 2024, he has a legal standoff. There was a legal standoff between Elon Musk and Brazilian Supreme Court. So Elon Musk was not abiding by the rules. Elon Musk was supplying internet connection for drug dealers in the Amazon. He was feeding the entire network of trafficking, gold mining, illegal gold mining. And then he goes on to a campaign saying that Brazilian judiciary was authoritarian, that Brazil, we had no freedom of speech. And that's what I take issue with libertarians that say freedom of speech is an absolute right. There is no absolute right. There is no person that fits into the category of having an absolute right to say anything, absolute right to own a gun, because we have conflicting interests, you know.
Yeah,
and my right not to be defamated, stop your right of what you think freedom of speech is. Freedom of speech also does not encompasses fact. Freedom of speech encompasses only opinions. Facts that you can counterproof, they are not within the scope of this fundamental right. So there's a convolution among the so-called libertarians, and they use this as a tool for hybrid warfares. So much so we have a proof, we have the bomb, and we kept the receipts in the case of Iran. What stopped Iran from having a hybrid warfare? When they switch off the American social media.
I mean, that's one of the things about Russia blocking WhatsApp is that, first of all, this is assertion that, by Western media that Russia is blocking WhatsApp because they want their citizens to go into their state-owned surveillance app. And I want to show you here what WhatsApp really is. Again, we have to position this in the terms of digital sovereignty and sovereignty of a nation. So here we have the Rolling Stone article that shows that FBI documents, and this is like 2021, this was reported, FBI document says the feds can get your WhatsApp data in real time. And so this article, I'll pull up the one that is not paywalled here, but it's really interesting because it just shows, well, basically how hypocritical, obviously, the US government is. We all know this, but, Meta received over 450,000 government requests for user data in 2022.
And that we know of.
And the US government that we know of was 236,928 user accounts. So they requested, so this one, the 450,000 government requests is for the whole world that we know of. The US itself requested data on 236,000, and so basically almost 200.
We have a second problem here. We have a extrajudicial request from the US to grab data in other jurisdictions. How severe is this?
Yeah, that's why this is so important. Yeah, exactly. Because the compliance rate from WhatsApp, meaning Meta gave over 88% compliance rate. They gave over your data 88% of the time. So it's a real big thing. And the details that they're giving is it's not necessarily the content of the messages, but it is subscriber information, contact lists, IP address, log in, log out times, IP address too, where your location is. So this is a pretty significant surveillance tactic. So obviously, if you are you are apparently on the enemy list of the US, like i.e. you're Russia, right? The number one enemy of the US, or number two, depending. You don't want the US to have this type of intelligence on your people or in your country, right? It's kind of insane. And also,
this is called espionage.
Yeah, it is.
No other name. Let's remember who Robert Maxwell was, the father of Ghislaine Maxwell. What made him such a high-profile Mossad spy? Because he created the program called Promise that will infiltrate in computers. This is espionage, textbook espionage. And Liana, now that we are talking about, now that we open the Pandora box, let's not forget Meta and Cambridge Analytica. In 2018, Mark Zuckerberg was invited to the British Parliament for interference, for selling data from users to Stephen Bannon. Stephen Bannon not only used the data, but he would psychologically profile you, and intervene in your account with propaganda, with lies, to dismantle governments, to elect governments. It's proven that Stephen Bannon, in an undercover in undercover news from Channel 4, one of his employees says, we are now going for Brazil after going for around 18 countries with interference. Yeah. So Stephen Bannon met with Bolsonaro family several times, supported. In the Epstein files, we see exchanges between Bannon and Epstein saying, for instance, yeah, let's pretend I'm not in Brazil, or along the lines, it's better that Bolsonaro is denying that we have a deal. So Meta is responsible for interfering in the democratic elections of several countries around the globe and establishing the far right, including Trump. Trump's first election was made based on Cambridge Analytica. Let's not forget about this. These are private people, private predators, full of the privacy, ruling the world, influencing governments every corner of the globe. This is the level. We don't want Meta. I welcome Russia expelling Meta from its ecosystem. Well done, Russia, for not accepting US empire espionage tool to interfere in a sovereign country.
Yes,
Well, China
exactly.
for having their own digital sovereignty. This is called digital colonialism.
Yes.
It's a new era of the imperialistic era in this sense.
Yes, exactly. So finally, Russia did that. Well done. I just want to say hello to some of our
Oh yeah, I forgot to send everyone our links.
Oh yeah, and please send links, because me and Sarah have forgot to send the links on social media.
Amazing.
I'm seeing some returning guests here. Thank you so much for joining us again. Ode to John Trudeau. I should learn how to just say that properly. Rafael, of course. Hello from Brazil.
Thanks, Rafael.
Atalal, greetings. And Luis del Cidos. Hi, I feel like I really butchered your name, and I do apologize for that. But now we're going to go over to our next item, because we're trying to be kept on time. Let's try to do this. Okay, Starlink smasher. This is a really funny, to me, this is a very funny article, but it's just an excuse for me really to talk about Starlink here. But supposedly, China claims world's best higher powered microwave weapon that can send up to 20 gigawatts pulses, and apparently will be able to target Starlink satellites. So Starlink has been very, very controversial again and again when we're talking about imperialism. This is another example of it, but this time in space, but also it's again surveillance. Starlink is I'm going to read this out so that I don't screw it up, but essentially Starlink is Elon Musk's SpaceX's global satellite internet network. So Starlink isn't just the biggest satellite network in the world, it's bigger than every other internet constellation combined. But let me just go back to this thing. This article that I'm showing you, a research team led by Wang Geng at the High-Powered Microwave Science and Technology Key Laboratory in Xi'an has reportedly engineered a compact directed energy system roughly the size of a small truck. According to Chinese disclosures, the weapon is designed to disrupt or disable electronics in low Earth orbit, including satellites. If accurate, this marks a significant step in China's effort to counter foreign control over space-based communications, i.e. Starlink. So the issue with Starlink is that it is US owned, US regulated, US jurisdictional. Like you said, the US going into international places and claiming jurisdiction. And it is absolutely aligned with US imperial agendas and US supposed, in quotation, national security priorities. Which national security priorities means US imperial agendas, okay? And it represents a structural concentration of power that effectively gives the United States a monopoly over global low Earth orbit communications infrastructure. And now, why is this significant? Because Starlink can bypass local telecommunication infrastructures. So that is significant, right? Like if you think about it, it means that Starlink and the US, sorry, wrong thing, will have access to whether or not you have internet, like your local population. They can block your internet, they can give you internet, they can thwart the the communications thing. So basically, how does this I'll give you two examples here of what this meant in just like the past month. Is one that you already kind of mentioned, Sarah, where you talked about Iran. So remember when they shut off the internet because the protests were turning into riots and violence, etc.
And they weren't organic. They were fomented with Mossad, with interference through this tool. It goes to show how important the digital tools of colonization are. And there is an element which I think is extremely scary. It's not only the United States as a nation. This is always private people, predators, depraved individuals like billionaires and Elon Musk's making deals with the state and in a way swallowing the state and its rules because they become so powerful that they can bypass even United States on rules. So we are talking here of a class of people.
I think that's where we have controversy amongst us and amongst people. For me, I just use that. That is the definition of imperialism, when billionaires and capitalists have power over the state. And the US is imperialist, so it has that type of system and structure. But to your point, it goes through private companies and it becomes transnational because it's imperialist. It has to keep expanding. But to go back to the Iran example, which you brought up, was that basically during that nationwide internet shutdown, if you remember, US officials publicly threatened to activate Starlink to bypass Iranian controls. They actually threatened to do that. Even Donald Trump actually officially stated in public that he was going to ask Elon Musk to get Starlink working more reliably. But luckily, Iran jammed Starlink, apparently reportedly using GPS jamming systems. So it's really important either way, like whether or not, it's important for these countries to have some sort of protection against a foreign country, obviously the US, coming in there and trying to like access their citizens, right?
And I mean, it's not only state here. We are talking about private individuals swallowing the state, not only using the state, but swallowing the very concept of state, where people have a constitution, have rights, have a jurisdiction. We got into a point where those billionaires became so important that they are no longer kings just sponsoring overseas trips and exploitation. They are going through a phase where they become they swallow the state itself. So they control the whole life of, Epstein goes to shows that what we have envisaged as rights, constitution, these people can go beyond it. They come beyond national legislation, sovereignties through technological advancements. It's so scary. They don't even are under state control. They have hijacked the state with their corporate coups everywhere in a transnational global capitalism. It's very severe. And then you have a state deciding that the corporate class is not going to rule them, and you call this dictatorship and you call this censorship.
Yes, I mean, exactly. And that's why I'm an anti-imperialist, precisely because of this system of.
And that's why libertarians are imperialist.
They are.
To the core.
Yes, absolutely. But I just want to talk again about, just to further emphasize this, Starlink has 8,000, because, okay, so we're talking about now the dominance of US on the tech sector, which is not going to hold. And that is why they consider China such a huge, huge threat and a problem, because currently Starlink has over 8,000 satellites already launched. Now, yes, it absolutely dominates right now. It has permission for 12,000 satellites, and it has a goal of around 42,000 satellites to be launched. They are ahead of the game for sure. But because the US is a capitalist economic model, they actually nurture monopolies. And in this case, you have a private duopoly of, Starlink, which is SpaceX on one hand. The second company that is like, it's not anywhere near Starlink, but of course, it is one of the big two. And guess which one it is? Obviously Amazon. It's Amazon, right? So essentially the US is going to operate in this duopoly. China, however, doesn't operate in this monopolistic system because it has a socialist system of state-owned enterprises, private enterprises, and also a mixture of different ventures. And so that sort of allows for more innovation because there's going to be so much more competition. I mean, already I was looking this up, and there's about 9 different companies in China that are developing satellites and will be launching something like 13,000 per company. So it will grow. I mean, I think the leading company right now is called Huawei Internet Constellation. It was launched only in December 2024. It is a state-owned enterprise, so China Satnet owns it, and it will be launching 13,000 satellites. So yes, it is behind, but I feel, knowing China as we do, right, it's not going to be behind for long. And obviously, Elon Musk, Starlink, US empire, they're going to try to stop China in any way they can.
And it just goes to show the level of awareness of China of what's going on in the world. I don't think, look, I went to the middle of the Amazon forest, not the shop, in the middle of the Amazon forest, in a place where you cannot go by boat, you cannot go by roads. And I stayed with isolated people of the Amazon. They had Starlink. We did not have hot water. We did not have hot water. They just recently had a water fountain by the government. These are isolated people of the Amazon.
Yeah.
Walking naked, speaking their native language. Amazon is host for the largest isolated people hub in the entire world. And they have a Starlink in every corner of the Amazon forest. Why? Because Elon Musk want to do good and deliver anything for native people? No, because they are mapping out. They are mapping out the Amazon. Is this part of digital colonialism? Exactly. That's why Elon Musk is so keen to get contracts in South Africa. They used to build roads to get gold. Now they have digital infrastructure. And it just goes to show how China is ahead in its thinking already.
Right. And they are, I mean, this last thing that I'm going to put up, is that, so we've been talking about on the ground issues with Starlink being this imperialist type of thing, but also China is talking about how Elon Musk's Starlink poses safety and security risks in space because there's not enough regulations from the US to allow for safety in space. So the Starlink satellites keep basically crashing in. Now, is it crashing in on purpose? It's always like with the US, it's like, is it incompetence or is it purposeful?
No, I think nothing is by chance. Go to their soft power, their shows, even the most apparently spontaneous talk shows and shows. It's everything planned. It's everything calculated. That's how they live their lives. But I want to tell you something.
I'm gonna have to push that.
For what is being treated in the Brazilian Supreme Court as the indigenous genocide of the Yanomami, because Elon Musk Starlink provided to over 20,000 illegal mining the whole network they needed. This is a criminal enterprise.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Bypassing your country's sovereignty, the laws, the local laws, it shouldn't be allowed, but it's obviously it's not allowed, right? But US imperialism does that. It does that despite you can't say no to colonialism. You don't say no to imperialism. That's
Exactly.
the point. You have no voice in that paradigm. So I'm
Exactly.
just showing you here how like China wants Elon Musk Starlink satellite pose safety and security risk, and they're just talking about how essentially because as all these satellites are launching, like we're saying, there's going to be like how many Chinese companies launching satellites as well up there. They're going to have all these collisions, and to your point, some of it might be on purpose, but I do have to say that we can't also overstate how these U.S. imperialism, these entities of imperialism are not omnipresent. They are not, undefeatable. They're actually a lot of them are very, very incompetent, and they just have so much money
Absolutely.
and power that they can kind of get away with it. So there are ways to defeat that. It's hard. It's not going to be easy, but yeah, this is just
The best way to defeat us is to gain a conscious how they operate. And it seems China and Russia have a very good understanding. Iran have a very good understanding of that. And as you say, these are often predators. Predators don't abide by the rules, so they don't really develop extreme intelligence working on the rules. So there's a huge level of incompetence, and as you say, part of their power projection is to pretend they are bigger, larger, and mightier than they actually are. So it's very good to know who they are and be sober about where they can go and cannot. Acknowledge our vulnerabilities, our strengths, and absolutely, you say it. They are not God. They pretend to be, but they aren't. And we have seen the global south rising in so many ways. And that's why they are desperate.
They are. And also to remember this whole thing of like, they use a lot of the propaganda to show how scary they are, how big they are, how invincible they are, basically to cower people as well. So we have to think it's also a weapon against our minds,
Yeah.
to not fall for it. I'm just going to look at some of the. Oh, thank you, Luis Alcides, for giving us one R. What is R? I don't know what that is, but thank you. We appreciate any
Oh,
donation.
it could be Brazilian. I don't have. It's the R and the S. This is Brazilians.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for watching us.
Yes, and also I just wanted to say, read some of these comments. Etalal is actually from Sydney, Australia, I think.
Wow.
And they say Happy New Year because it's Chinese New Year.
Oh yeah, no, 17th, isn't it? It's the year of the horse. I'm so excited about the year of the horse, Ileana.
Yes, it is the year, and you're the year of the horse.
So yeah, I'm so excited about it. Yeah.
Oh, we said that we were going to read your horoscope, so I should
we have to do that. Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that next week. But yeah, so I think a lot of people here in the comments are talking about Starlink, and yeah, good. I mean, people do know. I think our commenters and our audience are really pretty well versed compared to the average person. They're really well informed. We are
someone who's not so well versed as you. Just pass on our show so people can start. Probably with this at the beginning with our very open, unapologetic language, but they will understand. I'm sure people will understand because they do feel oppressed at some level.
Yeah, and we're going to be working on like trying to elucidate some of the definitions. I have some things in the works I'm really excited about. We also have a new show that will be launching, and our amazing graphic designer Martha is actually right this second designing our new Global South Rising.
Yeah, and thanks publicly to Martha. I love her design. I love her creativity. She adds so much value to Empire Watch. I love everything. I love her colors. I love everything about her. If she designs clothes, I'll hire her as well.
Yes, everyone should hire for everything, but she doesn't have time because I've given her too much work.
Okay, so let's not say no, math is not that good, is it? Yeah, don't hire her.
We'll take her away from us, but yeah, she deserves like
We have Ben
of
Chacko here. I'm so excited to have Ben here.
I'm trying to bring him on
connected.
I'm trying to bring him on. Oh, device is not connected, Ben.
Not yet connected, yeah.
Like how? Oh, okay. Yeah. So Ben, I think he's doing it. He's doing it. Thank you, Ben. All right, let's go to the stage. Yes, hello, Ben. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Ben Chacko, a journalist and editor at Morningstar, the only daily English language speaking socialist newspaper in the UK, in the world.
We're the only English language daily socialist newspaper in the world.
Oh my God! It's Ben.
I was saying the UK. Oh my God, that's amazing. So thank you so much for joining us. We have a lot to get through, and we only have half an hour of your time, so we're gonna get to it. Sarah was like, we need him for 5 hours, and it's like
I'm very happy to have you here, Ben. It's been one of my wishes in the show to bring you here. I'm very happy to have you here. Thank you so much for coming.
It's really nice to be on the show. Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to get right. Sorry, we are going to get right to it. Jimmy Lai, Hong Kong tycoon. I like to call him Giordano founder Jimmy Lai tycoon. Has been sentenced to 20 years in prison. Sarah, can you help us pull that up? Because I'm just having.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Just carry on talking. I'll do that.
Okay. So in December last year, Jimmy Lai was found guilty by the High Court of the Hong Kong Special Administration Region on 2 charges of conspiring to collude with external forces and a charge of conspiracy to publish seditious materials. And I'm just going to read from the Western media. The US, Britain, Australia, the European Union, Japan, and Taiwan expressed concerns about the impact of the sentencing. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio called the sentence unjust and tragic, saying it showed the lengths to which China would go to silence advocates of basic freedoms in Hong Kong. Predictably, Western media around this case is spinning this as a freedom of speech issue, sidestepping the very serious charge of foreign collusion under the Hong Kong national security law. Ben, can you help us break this down for us? Because obviously, to clarify this in context of the UK equivalent to this law and how the prescription of Palestine Action as a terrorist organization last year, although today we have just had a verdict on that, so that's an interesting development. That, prescription changes the way in which we need to view the extremely hypocritical use of this framing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is a contrast which is worth emphasizing between the situation in Hong Kong and with the ban on Palestine Action here. But I think the first thing we ought to be aware of is that this image being presented, particularly in Britain, which still has a bit of a colonial mindset when it comes to affairs in Hong Kong, that Jimmy Lai is some kind of press freedom sort of campaigner, a sort of Julian Assange of the East, if you like, is very far from the truth. I mean, Jimmy Lai has been nicknamed for decades the Rupert Murdoch of Asia. He's a billionaire media tycoon who owns TV channels and newspapers. And, media magnates are not friends of press diversity or press freedom. They are, as Rupert Murdoch has been, they use that control to push their right-wing agendas. Jimmy Lai is a neoconservative. He's very open about his ideology, says that his inspiration in life is Friedrich Hayek's book, The Road to Serfdom, which was a famous condemnation of socialism and by one of the really sort of forerunners of the modern neoliberal project. So that's where he is ideologically. But if we look at what he's been sentenced for, it's his collusion with foreign powers to destabilize Hong Kong. It relates to a series of very violent riots in 2019. Now, as we've seen in certain other countries, Venezuela is a good example. The presentation of violent rioting by opposition forces in socialist countries is kind of masked in the West. They present this as a democratic opposition, peaceful protests as being suppressed by the government and so on. that really wasn't the case if you actually look at what was happening in 2019 in Hong Kong. You have masked rioters who set fire to shopping malls, who attacked and destroyed infrastructure of the metro system, so to prevent the public transport system from working, who ransacked and smashed up the offices of the Hong Kong Federation of Trade Unions, of legislators who were seen as pro-China, and even people who were overheard speaking Mandarin Chinese in the street were attacked. Now, what's Jimmy Lai's connection with all this? Well, he's accused and been found guilty in court of helping to fund some of that activity, but also of colluding with foreign powers who were funding it. We actually know there's a lot of public information out there about the US National Endowment for Democracy and its funding over many years of opposition groups in Hong Kong. It's funded via various different sort of agencies. There are agencies like the National Democratic Institute, which opened an office in Hong Kong in 2002, which is affiliated with the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy, and they even held sort of projects where they trained up what they called young leaders of the Hong Kong opposition and so on. And there's another one, a global US Agency for Global Media, which got into the headlines in 2020 because the US actually was doing a restructure and it froze the funding. And part of that attacks on Donald Trump at the time around the freeze to its funding were that, oh, you've suddenly frozen $2 million that was earmarked for opposition groups in Hong Kong. So we don't often see that admitted by the US, but at that point, because they were doing a restructure, they admitted it. So that's the kind of money that was going in. Jimmy Lai, at the height of these riots, was in the United States. He held meetings with Mike Pence, the then Vice President of the United States, and with Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, in which he called for US intervention in Hong Kong. And we know that those riots, when they began, there were marches through the streets with people saying, Donald Trump, come and liberate Hong Kong. There were open calls for foreign intervention there. And I mean, I know we're pressed for time, but if you look at the whole framing of those riots, why did they erupt in the first place? We can see that there was a long-standing plan to seize on any issue, to suddenly create a lot of unrest in Hong Kong, to try to derail its integration with mainland China. And the reason I think that's very obvious is because of the trigger for those protests. It was this new extradition law that was brought in to allow Hong Kong to extradite citizens abroad to other jurisdictions to face trial, which was presented right across the media as a way for Hong Kong citizens to be subjected to the law in the mainland, which is obviously different because of the one country, two systems arrangement. But the trigger for that was a murderer, a young murderer called Tong Kai, who in fact was wanted not by the mainland Chinese authorities, but by the authorities in Taiwan, because he had murdered his 19-year-old girlfriend, stuffed her body in a suitcase, and dumped it, and then fled back to Hong Kong. Because Hong Kong had no extradition treaty with Taiwan, he could not be tried for murder. They were able to try him on a very minor charge and give him a year behind bars, but he couldn't be extradited to face this case, which in fact, he had actually admitted he was guilty in. So they brought in this law to deal with a case that anybody would want to see dealt with, and it involved actually extraditing him to Taiwan, not mainland China. But that was enough of a trigger for them to say, well, this extradition law is an affront to our rights, and therefore you see all of this big money being able very quickly to mobilize that wave of unrest and violence. So I think the case for Jimmy Lai having colluded with foreign powers to destabilize Hong Kong, on the surface of it, you might disagree with some aspects of the security law, you might disagree with the length of the sentence, but he is, I would say, fairly obviously guilty of what he's been charged with.
Yes. Ben, I pressed to make this question to you, Ileana. I would like to talk about the new label and Zionism, international Zionism here, for the benefit of our audience.
Wait, Sarah, before that, we wanted to talk about pro-action, remember?
Oh yeah, well, absolutely want to talk about Palestine action. Let me put this incredible video for Ben here. This is a teenager, 14-year-old Pat friend. A 24-year-old law student faced up to 14 years in prison for organize a Defend Our Jurist protest, where he suggested on Zoom that participants hold placards supporting Palestine. So he was actually on Zoom being spied or being tipped by someone. Here is young people protesting in Britain against genocide and being arrested for, under the terrorist law, the most severe legislation that there is under the sun, that suppresses your right to be silent, suppresses your right to have a lawyer. Ileana, back to you with your question on Palestine Action.
Well, I think, like we talked about today, we got the ruling that the Palestine Action ban has been ruled unlawful. Of course, there are some caveats to that, which I think, Sarah, you've mentioned before, that the government will be pursuing the case further, right? Ben, can you sort of update us on the latest news about that?
Yeah, so there was a judicial review, and the judges, a panel of 3 judges, ruled this morning that the ban on Palestine Action as a terrorist organization was unlawful because there wasn't basically any evidence that it was a terrorist organization. The judges did say it's an organization that encourages criminality because, of course, direct action involves vandalism of weapons factories and so on. The government has a right to appeal the ruling, and the ban remains in place while it appeals the ruling. So nobody's going to see charges dropped or be released just overnight. I think this is an absolute hammer blow, though, to the government's case. The definition of them as terrorists has been extremely damaging. Obviously, we've seen mass arrests, mass arrests for people sitting down in public holding signs saying, "I support Palestine Action," or various other formulations of words around that, which is a bit of a new thing for Britain to see that kind of repression being played out in the streets in that way. And, we've been talking about the issues in Hong Kong. This is not an organization that has been trashing public infrastructure or attacking civilians or, throwing Molotov cocktails into buses and so on. It's had very, very targeted acts of vandalism against factories producing weaponry which are being sold to Israel or used in weapons that are being used by Israel in a genocide. And so, they have an argument which they make in court that we are preventing a much more serious crime by doing this. So I think the case for the British state having kind of shown its repressive colours with these mass arrests is a very strong one. It's very important that we use the judge's ruling to overturn this ban. The actual definition of Palestine Action as terrorists has been used to justify appalling injustice, like the one we saw in the video. But also, if we look at the hunger strikers over the Christmas period, many of whom were on hunger strike for such long periods that their health may have been, very permanently damaged. There were periods where they were close to death, some of them, and they were protesting about a number of things, but partly the conditions under which they are being held in jail for periods well in excess of the usual period of pre-trial detention, in some cases for over a year, and denied gym visits, denied books, denied access to libraries, denied visits from friends and family, denied contact with each other or other prisoners, under this claim that, they're top security because they're imprisoned under this terrorism legislation. So even though they were arrested not for the terrorism law, they were arrested for specific acts of vandalism and so on, the fact that it's been defined as terrorists has enabled massive inhuman repression of these young people, and so we need to see that reversed. I think this government is really in trouble now. We've seen that. We're going to talk a little bit later on the Epstein files and so on, but it's Peter Mandelson's disgrace, the resignation of Keir Starmer's advisor Morgan McSweeney. These are very big blows to Keir Starmer's authority. Last summer, when Palestine Action was banned, the revolt among Labour MPs against that ban was very small, which I thought was disappointing. There was a much bigger revolt at the same time against cuts to disability benefits, but the Palestine Action issue didn't attract the same level of opposition. What I would encourage everybody to do now is basically say, we've beaten this ban in the courts, we need to beat it politically now. We need to redouble the pressure on everybody who's got any authority in Parliament to finish this off and basically stop the government from pursuing its appeal and actually force the ban to be dropped and for them to admit that they're wrong.
And by the way, if a Palestine election is, it's crazy that before you have a definitive sentencing that the Palestine action is a terrorist, not organization, still you're arresting people. So you're arresting people on the no legal grounds. So I hopefully they will go against the state and will be vindicated somehow of the war on terror that Keir Starmer is raiding on free speech, on the press, on activism to suppress the genocide, who is such a part in it.
I think that the police have really been pushing the boundaries of their powers based around this ban in terms of arresting people for saying things in a way that is highly unusual in Britain. And that escalated over the winter with protests outside the Ministry of Justice against the treatment of the Palestine hunger strikers, where police were actually arresting people and saying, we're arresting you because you used the word intifada. And, you know, they've not kind of done that again. I think there was a bit of a backlash and they realized we can't really defend that because nobody's banned that word. But it shows how far, if we allow them to get away with this ban and with these arrests on such flimsy grounds, we're going to see our free speech eroded right across the board. So I completely agree. We absolutely have to overturn it. This is a big victory today. The government has very little credibility left, and we need to sort of finish the job there, force them to drop this entire line of criminalizing Palestine solidarity, which isn't just about the Palestine action ban. There are the increasingly obstructive conditions placed on protests and marches for Palestine. And of course, later this month, we have trials of 4 leaders of the peace movement, Ben Jamal of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, Chris Nynam of the Stop the War Coalition, Sophie Bolt of the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament are among them. And they are going to be on trial, I think, on Monday, the 23rd of February, for their activities last January as part of a mass demonstration against the British complicity in the war in Palestine. So I think, again, we need a big protest on that day. We need to be saying, this is all bound together. We need to stop the government trying to criminalize solidarity with Palestine.
Ileana,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So one of our commenters is saying, could Ben Chacko elaborate on what trouble means for the UK government? Do you want us to go into the Epstein files question? Is that related to that? Would you say, Ben?
Well, yeah, I mean, all of these issues do interconnect because the Epstein scandal is one of the reasons why the government has so little authority left. And I mean, Keir Starmer was already, I think we shouldn't exaggerate the extent to which the last couple of weeks have been, you know, out of the blue. Keir Starmer was already, all kind of public opinion surveys show that his main characteristic, what people identify with him, is dishonesty. And that's because of his whole career. You know, everybody saw the way that he stood as a kind of successor to Jeremy Corbyn and pretended to have the same politics as Jeremy Corbyn, and then having taken over the Labour Party, immediately set off in a very different direction and purged and expelled members and so on. Now, Keir Starmer, everybody knows that he was lying essentially about what he knew and when he knew it. The fact that Peter Mandelson had stayed with Epstein after his conviction was already public domain before he was appointed ambassador to the United States. It was published by the Financial Times in 2023. And when he was appointed ambassador, the Morning Star, among other newspapers, said that. We said, you know, how can you appoint this person when he stayed at Epstein's house after he was convicted? So Starmer was well aware of all that. He has admitted that he knew that in Parliament, but he's continued in other interviews since then to kind of muddy the waters on that and say, oh, well, I was lied to by Peter Mandelson and all this kind of stuff. But nobody believes him. And I think the only reason why Starmer is still in office is because the various Labour figures who would like to replace him don't feel that the time is right for them personally right now. That's partly because there's a big by-election coming up, which Labour are expected to lose later this month, and you know, people they want Starmer to take responsibility for that. And slightly beyond that, there's May local elections coming up. Labour are expected to do extremely badly in those. So I think there's a feeling in the Labour Party that you know, let Starmer, now he's finished, take responsibility for all of the bad news that's going to come at us in the next couple of months, and then we'll get rid of him and bring somebody else in. There's also various personal issues around the different candidates who don't feel that now is exactly the best moment for them to sort of jump in. But the wider political issue there, I mean, there's the fact that Morgan McSweeney has resigned for advising the appointment. Keir Starmer's project in the Labour Party is much more Morgan McSweeney's project than it is Keir Starmer's project. You know, he founded this Labour Together in 2015. He was the one who came up with this strategy for Starmer of standing from the left, winning the party back to the right, expelling all of the socialists. So he is, and you know, ever since he's been the one who was behind the decision to suspend MPs who rebelled against the, retaining the two-child cap on benefits and things like that. So he has been really the brains of the entire Starmer project from before it even existed. So what will happen to that project without him? I think it's finished on one level, and Starmer won't be able to survive the loss of McSweeney. The problem is, can you then reset to before that? The project was about destroying Corbyn's Labour. Now that's been quite a thorough process, and we know that in fact a lot of the current MPs in Parliament were actually vetted by Peter Mandelson. He was the one who said we can run this candidate in this constituency. We're not going to allow that person in, and so on. So it's very difficult to see how the Labour Party can throw off that legacy. And behind Morgan McSweeney, of course, Peter Mandelson is a much bigger historical figure whose role goes right back to the beginning of New Labour itself. And, you know, is this the death of the New Labour project? I think it, in a way, it is.
Perfectly in our next question, Ben. Well, you saw we kept the receipts here. The Independent and The Guardian 2023 already said about the very close relationships between Mandelson. We also had the Classified UK talking about Mandelson and Epstein. So Keir Starmer did what he does best. He lied in Parliament and said, well, he painted sort of a distant picture. Well, he painted a picture about him and Epstein. This is by your own admission, lying in Parliament. I am flabbergasted how the Starmer project is still, and that hooks with my next question. Exactly. So it's about New Labour and the international Zionism. You talked about Peter Mandelson, Starmer's former minister, and Epstein associate. Let's not forget Mandelson always comes with Epstein associate. Epstein. He is widely recognized, Mandelson, as a principal architect of what we call New Labour. So for those in our foreign audience, New Labour is a deliberate ideological shift within the Labour Party towards the third way politics, market economies, Atlanticist foreign policy, in other words, an ideology-free neoliberal transformation of the working socialist party in Britain aimed at destroying Tony Benn's project for Britain. So Mandelson, Sweeney, Starmer have openly and widely, there is open, widely documented Zionism international capital. We saw other New Labour's figures, also like Tony Blair, very close to Zionism. McSweeney, as you say, created the Labour Together to launch Starmer's leadership bid to remove Corbyn. Double Down News reported that between 2017 and 2020, Labour Together, McSweeney's Labour Together received around 800,000 pounds in donations, but only from multimillionaires associated to Zionism, which he did not report at 730,000. He did not report it to Electoral Commission. So we had the Classified UK showing how Starmer and members of his cabinet were elected through hundreds of thousands of pounds from pro-Israel funders. Mandelson, and in the position as a UK ambassador, arranged for Starmer a visit to Palantir headquarters in Washington. And then the spy giant came back this is spy giant, which is essential to the Gaza genocide, received a 670 million UK contracts from Starmer in the NHS, in the Ministry of Defense without even a tender award. So that makes me wonder, was the New Labour project that began with Gordon Brown and Tony Blair an organic domestic political realignment to neoliberalism, or is an external ideological construct international Zionism? How much Zionism is in New Labour?
I think, well, there's a lot of different examples over a 30-year period, but I think that New Labour is best understood as a development within British capitalism and British politics. The origins of it are quite clear why it would happen at the time that it happened. It follows on from the influence of Euro-communism, which helped destroy the old Communist Party of Great Britain in the 1980s. And that was a retreat from class politics and this idea that we can mobilize around other kinds of social alliances. The working class is basically kind of an old-fashioned concept. That was in itself in response to the massive blows dealt to working class organization in the 1980s, with the Thatcher governments, the defeat of the miners, the defeat of the print workers at Wapping, the defeat of the dockers, basically the historic long-term defeat of the trade union movement, which has never recovered the kind of power or influence that it had before that point. And then you've got the collapse of the Soviet Union at the end of the 80s, which is a huge ideological blow to socialism all over the world. So the fact that within Labour, you then had a retreat from class politics and a kind of accommodation with neoliberalism, it makes sense in that environment anyway. I don't think you need to posit that there are people from outside who are trying to impose anything on it. But there will, of course, be international finance capitalists from the United States, Israel, and all over the place who have an interest in that project, and they will be aligned with that project. But I do think that you can easily see how it's developed out of British capitalism. So I wouldn't say it was imposed. And in fact, the links with Euro-communism are very, very strong. Peter Mandelson is one, but he's not the only person who actually did begin his political career in the Young Communist League and then moved into New Labour and the right. And there's various other figures like David Aronovich who were influential modernizers in the Communist Party, who then went on to become advocates of this neoliberal Blairite third way. So it's quite an interesting period in British political history, you know, how all of that happened. I think the reason Morgan McSweeney and Labour Together's donations are so heavily dominated by businessmen with ties to Israel is linked more to the Corbyn period. And Labour Together was very much founded as, you know, a way of reversing everything Jeremy Corbyn was trying to do in the Labour Party. And again, you know, the role of Corbyn's Palestine solidarity as a kind of focal point for the attacks on him became very, very strong after 2017. I don't believe that it was particularly an ideological choice by his critics. I think it's quite interesting if you compare the attacks on Jeremy Corbyn between 2015 and 2017, and then 2017 to 2020. In the early period, they're very scattergun. They accused him of having been a spy for communist Czechoslovakia. They accused him of having links to the IRA. They accused him of, you know, having no respect for British war dead and dancing at the cenotaph and all kinds of nonsense. And they accused him of anti-Semitism based on his support for Palestine. And after 2017, they drop everything except this anti-Semitism. I think they happened is that they rolled out a whole range of different attacks to get rid of this guy. And they saw that one of them was having more traction than the others. So they then said, well, we'll focus in on that one, go for it. So that's why these huge ideological battles over the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism and so on, all of these kind of issues around where almost declaring your loyalty to Israel became a way of saying that I'm on the Labour right, I'm loyal to the Transatlantic Alliance, I'm loyal to NATO, Washington, and so on. And defeating Corbyn and his pro-Palestine politics was a massive priority for them in that sense. So that's why I think we have a lot of interest by Zionist businessmen in anyone who'll get rid of Jeremy Corbyn. But I think British imperialism, I mean, it's the oldest capitalist imperialism in the world, obviously played sort of second fiddle to the United States since the Second World War. But the the logic for Washington and for US capitalism of maintaining this state in the Middle East, which has been a kind of bulwark of US influence in the Middle East, it has its own logic for them. You don't need the Israelis to be secretly controlling everything in Washington to understand why they want to dominate the Middle East. They want to prevent unity in the Middle East because it's been such an important area for both in terms of as a sort of communications and transport routes around the world at such a juncture, but also because it's been so important for resources and particularly oil. Making sure that there isn't a unifying Arab nationalism or anything of that kind that NATO represented at one point, which would prevent foreign domination of the Middle East, has been really important for the United States. And they've done that by building this very, very aggressive fortress state, Israel, which has become more and more extremist, more and more racist, and more violent over the years. But they've also done that by funding all kinds of other regimes in the Middle East. And I think a point that's sometimes made in this context is that while Israel is the largest recipient of US military aid, the second largest is Egypt. They sort of play the various sides in order to try and make sure that the Middle East does not unite against imperialism. And Britain is a partner of the US in all of that. So I would see the strong, I mean, I think that there is an aggressive, more than with most states, there is definitely an aggressive lobbying operation on behalf of Israel that goes on in Britain. We've seen lots of evidence come out about it, and Labour Friends of Israel, there were film footage of Joan Ryan, then an MP, discussing a donation of £1 million to help support essentially propagandizing and brainwashing Labour MPs into support for Israel. Talking to an official of the Israeli embassy. Now, there's regular scares in Britain about foreign influence on our politics, with the Chinese funding these people, or the Russians funding these people. There's lots of evidence that the Israeli embassy is funding people, and there is a taboo on talking about it, and you get accused of anti-Semitism quite a lot if you talk about it. But I think there is a distinction between that and saying that our ruling class is obeying orders from somewhere else. I think there's our ruling class is in partnership, very junior partnership with the US ruling class, and they have an interest in maintaining this Western alliance. There's also subsidiary reasons why that might be the case. For example, the role that Palestine tragically plays as a kind of live fire zone for testing weaponry that then the Israelis can go around and sell around the world, saying, it's battle-tested weaponry and that kind of thing. So I would say it's a more complex picture than saying that New Labour was a Zionist project. But there is definitely a political alignment, and it's significantly, for them, it's very significant, the Israeli alliance for them. It would be a big blow to them to have to give that up.
Thank you so much. Does that answer your question, Sarah? I know that we're out of time.
I think it was a masterclass on the British Empire entangled with the US Empire, with Zionism, and British history, important part of British history that we don't talk about, so we don't understand what's going on now. I really hope that's the end of Labour together. let's make Labour apart.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's, I know we don't necessarily have all the time in the world, but I think there's also an issue around political donations and lobbying in general. I think that the ideological hollowing out of the Labour Party has meant that, to a great extent, people are in this party for their careers, and you saw almost immediately Starmer was embroiled in a scandal over accepting money and freebies from Lord Ali. Essentially, there's lots of dirty money kind of sloshing around the party from all sorts of sources, and they don't see a reason to refuse donations from anybody and sort of accept that. And we were discussing earlier in the show the ban on Palestine action. We're seeing again and again evidence emerging of politicians doing what their donors tell them to do, or because of their revolving door between politics and jobs in these companies. And it's an interesting aside. We can't say exactly whether this was the one thing that determined that Cooper to ban Palestine action. We know that former head of the British Army, Lord Richard Dannett, was actually suspended from the House of Lords because he had been lobbying Home Office ministers to take action, as he called it, against Palestine action, because raising with them directly the case where they had attacked a factory owned by a company called Teledyne, and he was a paid advisor to that company. So I think there's lots more of this kind of stuff to come out. I think we'll find that, like Mandelson and like the Palantir example, which you explained so clearly, like there are lots of contracts, there are lots of political decisions that are being made because people behind the scenes are making money out of those decisions, and that's a real scandal that we need to keep focused on.
Yeah, just a little comment, like you talking about the revolving door. Even within the British government, I have worked there as a lawyer. You see a hollowing out, like the state being run as a corporation, the corporate language. We deliver services, we're not guaranteeing people's rights. You see a hollowing out of the constitutional values. You feel like you're treating people, citizens, as clients. That lobbies become far more important than any common good. It within the system, the state is being run as a corporation, and we have to be subservient to the needs of the corporation. And you there to be thinking about fundamental rights, to be thinking about people's ability to live or common good. The lobby, it's permeating the whole legislative field, and the body of the government is subservient civil servants. That is not they're serving corporations in the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think oh, are you gonna cut me off, Ileana?
No,
Ileana, sorry, you
we can spend as much time as you want, but I just wanted to know whether or not you had time to go over the Cuba oil thing. If not, it's fine.
Oh yeah, no, we should certainly move on to that. I think.
Yeah. And I'm gonna put up here your.
But I have it here, but do you want to finish your thought, Ben? Sorry for interrupting you.
Oh, it was merely that with the increasing concentration of wealth globally, what we're actually seeing is capitalist companies not even having having less and less interest in what life is like for ordinary people in a particular country, because the capitalist class is much less tied to Britain than it was 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we've seen it in the water industry where the privatized water companies are owned by companies that are based in Australia and things like that. And so you have effectively entire countries like Britain being used as cash cows for private companies based elsewhere. And that absolute erosion of civic rights, democratic rights before corporate power is, I think, almost the defining problem of our era. And it's a big part of the Donald Trump project, which is, of course, something that I think takes us on to the issues of Cuba.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, I'm just going to pull this up. It's actually from the Morning Star article on Cuba, but I think most of us know at this point that the U.S. has essentially done an oil blockade on Cuba. In late January, Mr. Trump, it says here, Mr. Trump, that's very respectful, Ben, signed an executive order that would impose a tariff on any goods from countries that sell or provide oil to Cuba. So can you explain the ramifications of this, and also how are Russia and China and other countries in the global south, I think Mexico is also coming to mind, responding to this urgent crisis?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should note that an illegal US blockade of Cuba has been going on for 60 years, ever since the Cuban Revolution, or very, very shortly after it. Cuba's been placed under these incredible restrictions in terms of trade, because the United States hates the example that Cuba sets to other countries of a sovereign Latin American nation that won't do what the United States tells it to do. And that blockade has already been overwhelmingly condemned at the United Nations. For the last 33 years in a row, there have been overwhelming votes at the UN saying this blockade has to end. The United States obviously has a veto at the UN, so there's not going to be a resolution that passes although even the US actually abstained on its own blockade one year under Obama. But that blockade has already had a huge impact on Cuban development. It causes shortages of all kinds of medical equipment, all kinds of different goods. And it's created this kind of siege artificially around Cuba. So this new tightening of that blockade is something which it's a development of an existing policy. It's an extraterritorial policy, and I think that's important when we talk to audiences around the world. The United States obviously has the right to say that we don't want to trade with Cuba if they don't want to. But what it's saying is that nobody is allowed to trade with Cuba. And in fact, at the Morning Star, just last week, we had a reader who wanted to send us a donation. We get donations from readers and so on, as well as sales and so on. And she said it was because she had read an article about Cuba that she really liked. She's sending us some money via PayPal. And because PayPal saw the word Cuba in her reference, they froze the payment and sent her an email interrogating her about where is this money going, why are you talking about Cuba? So that's an example that a reader in Britain trying to send money to a British newspaper because Cuba's mentioned, that's frightened a big international payment system like PayPal, because the United States, they're well aware, punishes companies anywhere in the world that it finds have been facilitating trade with Cuba. So that's an affront to the sovereignty of Britain and an affront to the sovereignty of every country in the world, bar the United States. Following Trump's really lawless actions in December and January, where an oil tanker from Venezuela to Cuba was actually just stolen by the US Navy. And then, of course, on January the 3rd, there was the lethal raid on Venezuela, the kidnap of the Venezuelan president. He's now said that we're going to completely block all oil going to Cuba. We're going to put tariffs on any country that dares to send oil or sell oil to Cuba. This is quite openly an attempt to starve the country out, essentially. The oil powers so many things in our society. So the public transport network will obviously break down, but the power generation, the hospitals, the lights will go off in big cities, the heating systems will fail, in hospitals and so on, incubators will shut off because of this, refrigerators will stop so that, food will spoil and so on. It's a real attempt to completely disrupt every aspect of Cuban life, to force the government to collapse. Trump's been quite open about that being his aim. So this is completely illegal under the UN Charter. The blockade was in the first place, but trying to force the government of another country to collapse is also completely illegal. And we really need to try to get more international solidarity with Cuba against this. Now, you do see some people online kind of saying, well, why does this country do that? I think we should be aware that the situation is quite difficult. The US has built up an enormous military armada in the Caribbean. It's already shown in December that it's quite happy to simply block a ship, board it, and steal everything on it at sea. So you can't, the Venezuelan government could put another ship to sea tomorrow filled with oil for Cuba, but it would simply be stolen by the Navy again. So there's no point in doing that. We have seen action by certain countries to breach the blockade. We've seen the Mexican government deliver aid this week, I think 800 tons of food aid and powdered milk and things. And before that, the Chinese government delivered 60,000 tons of rice, which is quite a significant amount. That is enough rice for at least sort of 2 months supply for the whole island. So they are taking action that they can to try to alleviate the problem. What will be more difficult, Mexico says that it's trying to work out a way of legally evading the blockade on oil without triggering the tariffs on it. Russia has gone a bit further and said we'll deliver oil anyway, we don't really care about the tariffs. Hasn't happened yet, but they've indicated that that's what they're going to do. So that will be interesting. Obviously, China's also got a world lead in things like renewable energy, and there's been a lot of discussion about can China kind of build up a renewable energy industry in Cuba that will make it less dependent on oil imports as well. But those are all things that will take time to happen. And I mean, Cuba's already had to tell international airlines, we cannot refuel your jets, which will have a huge impact on tourism, one of the biggest earners for the country. So it's a real emergency. I know that there are efforts in Britain through the Cuba Solidarity campaign, primarily to raise aid. There's a ship at sea right now delivering medical aid to Cuba that was fundraised for through the British trade union movement. We need to redouble all of that, but I think we also need to put political pressure on the British government to stand up to Trump and say this is all illegal. You know, we are not going to abide by it. We're going to call it out, and we're going to help Cuba to get around these problems. On that question, though, obviously the British government's been going in the opposite direction, and despite not having any sanctions on Venezuelan oil itself, it assisted with the military seizure of an empty oil tanker that had been Venezuelan, but had then been it had switched its national flag to the Russian flag, and that was an operation which took place last month off the Scottish coast. An extremely dangerous operation. The Russian Navy had already gone in to say they were monitoring and protecting their ship, and the British and American militaries went in and seized the ship anyway. So effectively, the only reason we didn't end up in a shooting match with the Russian Navy is because the Russians decided to show restraint in that scenario. What we'll see if the Russians do try to send oil directly to Cuba, will the US Navy try to forcibly stop them from doing it? How would the Russian Navy react if they did? I think all of these questions show how much Trump is actually flirting on a very regular basis with World War III. And that is a problem that stretches way beyond Cuba. It's one of the reasons why all of us have a real interest in stopping him before one of these situations just absolutely blows up.
I'm certainly agreeing with you, but I can't even unmute myself. But yes, just stopping World War III or nuclear apocalypse, you know, I mean, that's what the scary thing is. That's what the stakes are, a nuclear apocalypse. Thank you so much, Ben, for taking up so much of your time, even though we said 30 minutes. We took off almost an hour. Yeah, we really appreciate you coming on. Sara, any last words? Your dream has come true. So
my dream has come true. Thank you so much for being here with us. I hope you're not so traumatized that you can't come back.
No, it was a real honor to be on the show. I think it was my second interview with the show. It's
yes,
great to be back on.
Yes, thank you so much, Ben. I'm going to put your interview in the links below. If I haven't already, I think I have already. Anyone who wants to know more about Ben or hear more from Ben, please go and watch that. Thank you, Ben, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
I was asking the artificial intelligence how long would do is to have until the end of the Trump regime. And they are saying 1,000 days and 1,072 days. It's a lot. It's 2 years and 11 months.
Oh my God, that was wonderful. But yes, and I hope, Trump is trying to say that he's going to extend, obviously he's too old, but people are trying to extend his term through one way or another, whether it's like putting up another candidate that pretty much mirrors his line, which, let's face it, is really sort of determined by the war hawks and the deep state. It's not like Trump doesn't really have an independent foreign policy. So
the American people who votes for him, the American people needs to wake up. The American people has voted for Trump. They have a responsibility.
They do, which leads us to our next story. I don't know if you want to, so I don't know if you
go ahead. It's so shocking, everything. You go ahead first.
This is pretty shocking. Okay, so to caveat this, we are going to say Code Pink, anti-war group Code Pink has been targeted by the US government. Now, this isn't the first time, but it's a pretty serious thing here. I'm going to put up, to give like a lot, I think a lot of people might actually not necessarily know what Code Pink is. So I'm just going to put that up so that people can see if I can do it technically. But yes, Code Pink is an anti-war, is a feminist grassroots organization working to end US warfare and imperialism, support peace and human rights initiatives, and redirect resources into healthcare, education, green jobs, and other life-affirming programs. this is very much what the US needs, right? Like to redirect their resources, which they have a lot of resources. But how did Code Pink start? Medea Benjamin, Jodie Evans, Diane Wilson, Starhawk, and about 100 other women kicked off Code Pink on November 17th, 2002. They set up on a 4-month all-day vigil in front of the White House during the cold of winter to protest the US-led war on Iraq. So they have been in existence for a long time. I want to pull up, though, friend of show, Carlos Martinez, who you also know very well. He's been wonderful and on this show quite a few times. And this is what brought me to the attention of this news article. State Department identifies.
Let's hit his comment about it.
Yes, absolutely. But here, just to read the headline, State Department identifies Code Pink and other far left groups as vectors of Chinese influence operations. We're going to go into Code Pink's response to that because it's absolutely, completely ludicrous. But let's see what Carlos says. He says here, this escalating McCarthyite, red under the bed hysteria is extremely alarming. It's also profoundly ridiculous. Code Pink has also hosted, in quotes, Code Pink has also hosted pro-China webinars, including one where an activist applauded the Chinese Communist Revolution. This is Carlos again. My God, surely not pro-China webinars, surely not applause for the Chinese Revolution. How could anyone possibly speak favorably about a process that created the most wide-ranging and thoroughgoing anti-poverty campaign in history that has increased life expectancy from 35 to 79, that has turned China into the world's only green energy superpower, that has transformed China from a state of desperate poverty and backwardness into a science and technology powerhouse? Something must, in capitals, be done. So that is Carlos's comment on that, a little bit of sarcasm there, but also, to preface for, to give context, everyone, the anti-China, the anti-poverty campaign that he's talking about lifted 850 million people from absolute poverty. If you think that the UK has, I don't know, like 70 million people, the US has 330 million people, that is almost three times the size, 2.5 times the size of the US entire population that has been lifted out of absolute poverty. So that is the level of achievement that we're talking about here. And of course, the US cannot deal with that. I mean, that would be insane. So what they're doing now is they held a full committee hearing on foreign interference in American nonprofits, which they have included Code Pink on that. But I do want to sort of preface that I have interviewed 2 people from Code Pink, so I'm going to plug Global Majority for Peace again. Sorry about that. So every show I have to kind of plug that, but it's because we did do some really good interviews. This was our 7th episode ever with Danica Katavich, National Co-Director of Code Pink. And then we did another one, our 50th episode with Megan Russell. She is the China is Not Our Enemy campaign coordinator. Now, this is like a really significant campaign that they're doing, because really China is being considered, as we've mentioned many times on this show, the US's number one enemy. And China's really not any of our enemies. So please check that out. I'm going to put the links down below in the description. Let's look at Code Pink's. Should we look at Fox News's report on this?
And I think like Carlos is always so spot on with his analysis. He's saying the level of irrationality in classifying Code Pink as a pro-revolutionary, it shows 2 things. It shows that the people persecuting them knows nothing about China. nothing about China and knows nothing about Code Pink. It's just this maniac called MAGA. MAGA is a maniac club. And I don't know if you know about Code. I'll let you know who is persecuting Code Pink. These are people who are completely ignorant and projects communism in everything that is not a MAGA aligned. Everyone who's not MAGA aligned is a communist. This is called fascism. If people aren't with me, they are my enemies. This is called textbook fascism. It shows the level of ignorance towards other cultures, towards social movements, and it's a deliberate ignorance. It's a proud, deliberate ignorance of the American white supremacists, because there's a huge racist element here that drives this. Is a fundamental psychological element of this persecution. We have to talk. There's racism, a very, very large amount of it.
Yeah, they will use any of those tools, like any tools, basically to amplify your ignorance around a subject. So racism is a very, very useful tool, you know, because people might already be scared.
Ileana, I'm not sure whether my internet or yours stopped. I think you have to go back and say it again. You say racism is one of the tools to amplify the established ignorance. Yeah.
Yeah, they will. So imperialism essentially will use any tools that will amplify ignorance. And racism is one of the clear-cut tools, because they don't want you to know about China. They don't want you to know about the achievements of China. And so what they do is, you might have ignorance about China. You might not know about China. China is very big. You might have some fear of the unknown. They amplify that and create sort of this anti-China. China is not to be trusted. And it has like tropes that are already sort of existing in your psychology, because, you know, you are ignorant about a country that's huge.
Oh, you just brought me to something inside of the US that caused a huge MAGA outcry, which is Bad Bunny on the Super Bowl saying, God bless America, and naming all countries in the American continent, because America is not a country, it's a continent. You should have seen the level of outrage that you had on Fox News, on MAGA movement. No one understood a word of what Bad Bunny says. Oh, hello. First of all, there is not an official language in the US. Spanish is the second most spoken language of the US. No one, just Bad Bunny, knows this dying language. That's what they are trying to say. Megyn Kelly say it was a middle finger to America. Well, it's a middle finger to racists in America. That is. It's crazy. You know, this is all very feud with a huge level of racism, sometimes latent, sometimes chronic, sometimes outspoken, and sometimes hidden. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, I mean, I would say one thing about Bad Bunny controversy in the Super Bowl. It's another example of how the US really narrows the scope of conversation, because yes, it is maybe sort of a slight nod to the racism in the US, especially with ICE. And it is a slight nod to the protests that are happening. But essentially, Super Bowl is this huge capitalistic corporate entity that is also connected to the military industrial complex. Puerto Rico is not, you know, it's a colony of the US. You know, so there are all these other issues that like the MAGA person is not gonna, they're just gonna focus on he's Spanish or he's brown.
Not even the narrow scope of conversation is palatable for them. It's unbelievable.
It's a distraction from like the bigger issues, and they're caught up in this trap where they're just feeling so self-righteous and, you know, outraged on both sides, actually. But their scope of conversation doesn't include the big problem that they have, which is capitalism.
You have mass shootings and nobody talk about the Second Amendment. They talk about anything, profile, if it's trans, if it's not, it's a gun person. In Canada, you name the trans woman gun person, that becomes the news, not the mass shooting.
Exactly. They always have to deflect from the real root of the cause or the real issue that we should be struggling, which again brings us back to Code Pink, because they're saying that Code Pink is a foreign influence thing. If we look at this Fox News situation here. This Fox News, obviously Fox News is not something we take seriously, but the thing is Fox News is one of the most popular media outlets in the US. So we have to kind of understand what they're putting into the zeitgeist in the US. And even if people don't read Fox News, the type of narratives from Fox News gets it gets like it not infiltrated, but it gets put into the wider conversation about these topics. So here it is saying what to know about Tuesday's House hearing on foreign influence in American nonprofits follow the money. They're suggesting that Code Pink, which is just an anti-imperialist, anti-war, not-for-profit grassroots organization, is getting its money from China, which, by the way, like, why would China do that? They have a lot of problems. They have a lot of things that they're dealing with. They have a lot of things, that issues that they are working on in China. They don't really have to go to a small peace group like Code Pink to try to do what, exactly.
Incredible that they feel threatened by Code Pink. This is the United States of America. This is the Department of Justice.
Exactly.
And they feel threatened by Code Pink. How big are you?
Exactly. It's really ridiculous. But like, I'm just reading here that
they are going to be now very concerned about cockroaches in Kazakhstan. That will be the next step.
Okay, so to be fair, Code Pink is really good.
Oh, it's really important, but what kind of threat is this?
Yeah, it's not. I mean, the thing that
democratic space, democracy is a threat.
So this is the full committee hearing on foreign influence in, so this is where you can watch the whole thing. It's 4 hours.
No, please don't play this. Don't play this now. Oh my God. But people, please do that. Do the homework.
Yeah. And essentially what it really is a tool to, I'm sharing this tab instead, far left groups with foreign ties undermining US under guise of protest. So
party in a bit of a tough spot.
Do not want to listen to Fox News. But what we have to realize is that this is just a tactic to suppress genuine protests, left-wing protests. I mean, the US has a really big history of suppressing leftist voices, So I'm going to read here. I think before I get into that, let me just pull up Code Pink's statement against this so we understand what their response is, because they're obviously innocent of what they're being accused. So here's their Instagram reel. It's a pretty good one. Let me see if I can pull that up. Sorry. Here you go. Almost there.
That's okay. This is StreamYard. We're using okay, let's go.
Okay.
Pink, very irritating group to some people. But of course, they are protesting war, protesting aggression, and they have a constitutional right to do that.
So we're going into the office of Jason Smith, who held a hearing yesterday in which he accused Code Pink and our friends like the People's Forum and Breakthrough News of taking money from the Chinese Communist Party. And I'm sick and tired of hearing that because you know what? One, we don't take any money from the Chinese Communist Party. And you know what? Jason Smith gets $100,000 from an entity representing the Israeli government, and that is AIPAC. So he's the one that should be investigated, as well as so many of these people in Congress for representing a foreign government, which, by the way, is a genocidal government.
So this is
wonderful. Yeah.
This is the thing that Code Pink is really famous for and is really gained traction for. They go to Congress, they keep these politicians accountable by asking them questions to their faces, and this is why I think they're being targeted. And their statement here is about this is today's hearing. Let me pull that up as well and just get their full statement for you guys to see. Because it's it's obviously an important denial.
And you have to see Code Pink is a woman, all women band. This is also very threatening because they, in a way, if you want to know, they are challenging another very asymmetric structure, which is patriarch.
Yeah, so here they are saying here, today's hearing by the Ways and Means Committee was not a legitimate hearing, but rather politically orchestrated attack on the First Amendment. In a blatant display of hypocrisy, the committee attempted to discredit Code Pink and a broad range of respected organizations from Indivisible and Breakthrough News, which we're a fan of. And we have actually interviewed Eugene Poirier and Rania Khalek, to the People's Forum and even the Future Farmers of America with unproven accusations. So this is really important. Again, they've stated repeatedly, Code Pink receives no money from China or any foreign governments or political parties. They are funded by thousands of individual donors. Okay, this is an important rebuttal to what's actually been going on. But
yeah, and I think the another very important rebuttal is where this comes from, Ileana. Check this out. Cotton to Bundy, investigating Code Pink, Washington, D.C. This is from November 2025. Senator Tom Cotton, Arkansas, Republican Arkansas, today sent a letter to Attorney General Bondi, Pam Bondi, the ICE maniac, requesting an investigation to Code Pink for potential violations of Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA, and material support to foreign terrorist organization, FTOs. Code Pink has received funding from groups aligned with the Communist Chinese government and partnered with designated FTOs. Look who is behind this. Nobody else than the serial killer called Pam Bondi, the one who is raging a racial war on American streets.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's all, sorry, it's all part of this concentrated effort. And we do have to put it in historical context that the US has, for over a century, essentially repeatedly targeted left-wing movements whenever they challenge the foundations of US power. And now we're looking at it more overtly as US imperialism, but essentially we're looking at like the first Red Scare, federal raids, deportations of socialists, anarchists, immigrant labor organization. I mean, I don't put much stock in anarchists, but they also were so-called targeted. Although if you read some of these books, anarchists were also usefully used by the U.S. government to destabilize communist movements. So I think that's really interesting as well.
Well, it depends because the history of anarchism is very complex. If you go to Barcelona, the rebel Barcelona, they managed to have a 1-year anarchist government. So in Europe, anarchism is very different from the United States.
That's the paradox, isn't it? But in the US, anarchists have been famously used to infiltrate communist movements and destabilize them. COINTELPRO, that was from 1956 to 1971, was an FBI program that infiltrated and disrupted Black liberation groups, anti-war coalitions, and socialist organizations, including community programs like the Black Panthers Free Breakfast. So it's a Cold War pattern that is still in existence today, and leftists are essentially targeted more maybe than any other group because they are the ones that are fundamentally against establishment capitalist imperialist structures, right? And I think we do have to position it into the way that the US government is going after these groups, Code Pink, etc., just shows you that fundamentally US citizens do have more power than we are led to believe, or they wouldn't be going after them in this fashion. And out of all the citizens in the world, US citizens probably do have the most power to stop their government committing imperial crimes, which, to reiterate, includes multiple genocides and other atrocities around the world, right? But the citizens in the world, of which we are citizens too, the US citizens have the most power to stop their own government. And of course, the government is going to crack down so heavily on them and make them feel powerless and defeated.
Yeah. So one commentary here, very interesting. Ode to Jerome Trudeau. He said, Code Pink also helps DAG, Doctors Against Genocide, which is still learning how to be effective activists in the hostile DC environment. So we see here a link. Cold Pink is throwing salt on the wound, which is called the genocide. And she went to say, look, this is APAC. This is an APAC subsidiary chasing us. So there is a clear alliance all with the Zionism in this equation. Racism, Jewish supremacy, white supremacy. I think where there is Bondi, she's so vulgar. I don't know if you've seen her in her questioning in the US Congress. She looks like a small vulgar thug lying through her teeth. Absolutely horrific how this woman is doing whatever it takes to protect a pedophile ring and to protect Trump. And she's so blatant about her lies. And it doesn't get me wonder that this is happening in the US. It's becoming so ostensive. And therefore, yes.
I'm gonna show, okay, for finally, and then we can wrap up. I'm just gonna show one of my favorite Code Pink reels, because like you said rightly, I think what Code Pink is really good at is that they're able to thread the needle through all these issues, because the US is responsible for a huge slew of issues, including the genocide in Palestine, which they're absolutely relentless on making sure that the US, that they hold their politicians accountable for that, which is really good. They've done so many actions, blood on their hands type of thing, when they go to the Congress and talk about the Gaza genocide, etc. But they also recently did this, which I thought was really good. Here you go. Let's see.
We have a special guest here, and we want to make a toast for the Secretary of Treasury, Scott Bessent. Oh, yeah. So let's give it up for the man who is eating in peace as people starve across the world based on his sanctions for economic warfare.
Of course you're going to do this. It's the truth.
He oversees the death of 600,000 people due to sanctions annually. And this president, let's cheers to the Monroe Doctrine. Trump today said that Venezuelan oil.
And you have no idea how ignorant you are.
Ignorant. You are responsible for the death of 600,000 people annually because of sanctions. How many people are going to die because of the blood is on your hands?
The blood is on your hands. You should be ashamed.
It's beautiful. Those are serial killers for sure. I mean, they are worried about Ted Bundy. I'm worried about Pam Bundy.
Exactly.
Yeah, these people are serial killers with power in their hands, with state power, public faith in their hands. And the American public is still voting for them, Ileana.
But it's like we said before, it's not just Trump, right? The sanctions are through every single administration, and it causes 600 deaths a year. 600,000 deaths a year. And it's through it's like, it really is. This is U.S. imperialism. This is
and Britain has a huge array of sanctions. They go on sanction the whole world and then put a ban on civil servants. You cannot travel to that place because they are enemies. Yes, they have to be your enemies.
Yeah, the UK is lock and step, and we talk about the tricontinental hyper-imperialism dossier all the time. It's in the inner core of US-led imperial bloc, which that's what we call the US empire. So the UK we should never suggest that the UK is not responsible, equally as responsible, although quite diminished in power in comparison, right, to how big the US is, but equally as responsible in terms of active participation, I would say, which is a lovely way to end.
I have a bit of a problem saying that the UK is just US lapdog. Yes, they are.
But more than
they have their own interests. Let's say Assange, how they push for Assange incarceration with Sweden, with everyone. They're so responsible. They're not just a assistant to crime. They are criminals themselves.
Yeah, that's the thing. They are lockstep with the US, but that doesn't mean that they're not responsible for their actions. You know, we have proven time and time again that we do not differ in terms of agenda or interests. We are absolutely lockstep with the US, so we are equally responsible. Yeah, which is a lovely way for us to end. And is this the shortest live ever? Maybe by 3 minutes.
Oh no, yeah, I thought we made it better this time around. No, we haven't. And I know you have an appointment now, a professional appointment. I'm really sorry.
Well, it was
a wonderful live. It was a wonderful guest. We have wonderful guests, I have to say.
Yes, we absolutely do. Thank you so much. I tried to rush through as many topics, but somehow had too much to say. It was lovely spending time with you, Sara, and lovely to spend time with everyone watching. Thank you so much especially for the commenters who come, every week, and they give us like very insightful comments and they join the discussion. We really do appreciate it because we've just started this live, and so it's just gathering steam. Well, steam is not yet. The steam will come. Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ileana. Have a lovely weekend, everyone. Carnival in Brazil has already started last week, and now we're going to go for it. Yeah.
Oh, have fun, Sara. Okay, bye.